Hello viewers, welcome back to another important session. Especially we are dealing with the lifespan development, in which today we are going to discuss about leisure and recreation in elderly. So, the whole purpose and the objective of today's session would be to find out the various nature of leisure activities and how the recreation activities are performed during the old age period. So, before that we would like to know what exactly we understand by leisure. Leisure is a free time or an unobligated time that is taken place after the retirement in the elderly. Not only after the retirement period, but if you observe from the beginning of our childhood to the old age, there are number of leisure time available from our childhood to till date. So, but the major chunk or the vast area of leisure is experienced during the old period, especially after retirement. Now, we are also going to understand what is the meaning of recreation. So, recreation can be defined as an activity that is performed during the leisure period for the purpose of enjoyment. So, it is very essential that people not only have leisure, but it is important that this leisure period needs to be utilized in an enjoyable task. Every individual has a leisure time. We not only considering old age people, but even in young adulthood there are certain leisure time available. So, how the young adult spends his leisure differs from the elderly person's leisure activities. So, if you go back to the young adulthood, the leisure activities, we cannot assume that major leisure is available among the young adulthood, because they are preoccupied with certain career, occupation as well as domestic chores. Therefore, it is impossible for the young adult to have leisure time during this particular period. Whereas, in old age the leisure and recreational activities are quite possible, as the elderly people after retirement have major leisure time. If you understand after retirement, what is the role of the elderly people after retirement? Now, if you go back to your family members who are retired, or if you know your grandparents who are at home, or somebody is also working even after retirement. So, there are number of activities that can be expected even after retirement among the elderly people. If you compare the retirement person with a working employee, now there is a lot of difference that you can understand. The retired person have more time, they are able to spend more time with their young grandchildren, they have more time to spend with their spouses, and also not only the family aspects, but they are also involved in the community aspects. So, it is important that though they have worked hard for the long period of their time, but it also becomes essential that they are also involved in the later retirement life period. We can remember a saying which goes like this: the empty brain is a devil's workshop. So, sometimes having an empty brain or not engaged in any sort of activity can get into certain problems. So, it is important that even in the old age period, both the mind and body should be engaged in some sort of activities. Now, with retirement, many elderly people try out many activities to which that suits them to spend their rest of their life in terms of leisure activities, but it does not happen so. Why? Because any activity after retirement cannot be enjoyed unless that individual personally feels gratifying or feels pleasurable. Therefore, after exploring all sorts of activities for the leisure planning, it becomes very essential that not only after retirement, but certain interests should also be influencing the individual's leisure activities. Therefore, the hobbies or the interests that the elderly person enjoyed during the period of early adulthood or during the period of childhood or in middle age, it becomes very essential that all these interests and activities should be sustained even in the after retirement period. Involvement in leisure activities is very essential for physical as well as mental health, because there should be a continuous body mind coordination, which helps in quality of life, well-being, and as well as good physical health. Further, it also helps in reduced mortality, because the body mind coordination has a positive role to play in the individual's life and also even with the social relationships. Simply participating in any sort of social interaction does not enhance an individual's well-being, but it is very important that the individual personally feels gratifying while interacting with the social groups. Therefore, it is not for the sake of involvement, but it is also important for the individual's interest which lies and also which enhances his well-being. What is the purpose of leisure? Why, especially in old age, leisure is necessary? Don't we think that leisure is always important, even in an individual who is a young adult or an adolescent or a middle-aged person also requires certain leisure period, but it becomes very essential or it becomes very crucial for the elderly person to have a leisure period. Therefore, retirement provides an opportunity for an individual to enjoy his leisure time. Therefore, there are certain 5 objectives for an elderly person why one should have leisure. The first one is for relaxation, the second one is for diversion, the third is for development, and the fourth is creativity, and fifth one is for the pursuit of sensual pleasures. Therefore, let us see how best we can explain all these 5 factors which are very important for the purpose of leisure. Here I would like to focus on one thing. All these 5 objectives are very important, and it becomes very crucial for the cognitive, emotional as well as the physical involvement is concerned. Any activity for that matter, relaxation, developmental activity, creativity or diversion, it requires certain amount of cognitive involvement, emotional involvement, also certain physical involvement. Therefore, the intensity matters. How intense is the developmental and creativity related aspects are important to consider. Apart from the intensity, it is also important that the energy level of the elderly people is of utmost concern. Sometimes the energy levels may not be able to suit the individual's leisure activities. Therefore, it is important that apart from intensity, the expenditure of energy levels are also crucial, and also there is a need to focus for the attention. Sometimes old people are unable to pay much attention for a particular period of time. Therefore, it becomes very important that in order to involve into any leisure activity, it includes cognitive, it includes emotional, it includes physical involvement, which has certain amount of intensity and also certain amount of energy and also some amount of focused attention. Therefore, and apart from all these factors, the level of sensory stimulation is also important. So, therefore, it becomes crucial for the individual to perform all these tasks during the leisure. So, let us explain all these 5 objectives one by one. The purpose of leisure, we can think of the relaxation as the first objective. Many old people, if you have observed, you find them always being relaxed, especially after retirement. Many individuals try to find relaxation in terms of sleeping or sometimes resting, daydreaming and also sometimes fantasizing. So, it is basically, it does not involve more of intensity, but it is in terms of relaxation is concerned. Therefore, their physical involvement is in terms of a relaxed posture. Another important objective of leisure is diversion. Many after retirement want to get diverted from their regular routine task. So, they try to choose television as one way of diverting their attention or diverting their leisure, and also it involves a medium low form of involvement which requires certain amount of activity to perform in terms of television viewing, in terms of reading a newspaper or in terms of conversation with friends, involving oneself into indoor activities and then going to parties, watching athletic events, and all these have certain amount of intensity. The third objective for the purpose of leisure is developmental task. So, in this particular period, some individuals after retirement want to enhance their skills, they want to enhance their cognitive skills in terms of learning, memory, thinking, and all these factors are involved in a medium intensity. Therefore, their pursuit is often in terms of physical or cognitive skills. Many of them are interested in writing, many of them are interested in serious reading, some of them try to visit certain museums, go traveling, and all these involve certain amount of medium intensity. In terms of developmental aspects, many elderly are also inclined for further education. Sometimes they are also interested in learning some musical instruments. Some people are also engaged in poetry, some people are engaged in writing stories and many other aspects. Another most important intense level of involvement is the pursuit of sensual pleasures, and all these sensual pleasures which go beyond sexual activities to include any form of involvement or any form of leisure activities. This provides an intense pleasure in the individual and also extreme joy. Therefore, the sensual pleasures can go beyond the sexual activities of the individual. They can go in terms of extreme blissful activities which gives them more satisfaction and joy. Here are a few list of leisure activities which are performed across the world among the elderly people in terms of visiting to libraries, reading magazines and books, television viewing, listening to radio, seeing movies, engaging in indoor physical activities, working on puzzles, playing cards, chess, bridge, bowling, betting, participating in community activities, especially the social activities where they engage in certain elderly common groups, and they try to enhance the well-being among the individuals who are having low self-esteem, and also they are into the generation of young people who want to achieve something in life, in order to guide them, in order to be a mentor. So, they perform all these social activities, and here we can think of as many possible leisure activities that can be performed during the old age period, but it is also important that the individual's physical aspects are also considered equally, because not many elderly people are able to perform certain leisure activities. But after enjoying or after going through these leisure activities, one gets a very good important observation is that the body and mind coordination is very effective, and also it helps in preventing from atrophy due to disuse. Therefore, it is very important that all these leisure activities that are listed are important to be enjoyed, are important to be experienced by the elderly people. Therefore, it helps them in preventing certain atrophies. It becomes very important that the idea of planning should be well programmed or well planned. Otherwise, it is not that we have to enjoy the leisure as and when it comes. It is not so. There is a need to have some leisure activities in the beginning of an individual's young adulthood period itself. Therefore, they will understand that what they have been enjoying for the past many years is now has become their hobby and as an interest to continue the leisure period. It also enhances the body mind coordination, as we were discussing earlier. It keeps the body and mind fit, and also if necessary to ensure that such occupations would also provide some supplemental income or provide a means of one's own fellow men. It is important to understand that leisure should be enjoyed by every individual even after retirement. It should not be a pressure on the individual that leisure needs to be enjoyed by everybody. It should not be a stressful factor for the elderly people. Therefore, leisure activities should be planned much earlier, and it should be preferably enjoyed by the elderly people. It should not cause any inconvenience or stress to them. Apart from engaging in leisure activities, there is another important observation among the elderly people who after retirement also wish to continue, or they go for re-employment, or they search for some part-time jobs, or sometimes they continue their profession. Now, it is very important why such people offer themselves even after retirement. It is either because of their financial constraints, or because they want to engage themselves in their previous activities, so they continue, or because of the availability of the occupation they prefer to work. And all above, it is an income generating activity. Therefore, many elderly wants to engage into certain profession, certain income generating activities even after retirement. Now, those who are not employed, especially the self-employed people like doctors, engineers and many other professionals, have no such restrictions like they have to go for a retirement, but if they wish, if they can decide themselves whether they can work or whether they have to stop, and it all depends on their individual's ability to perform. Now, we are going to discuss about various problems during leisure. Now, it is very obvious that with increasing age, there is a decline in the pursuit of leisure. Not many people, especially after 75 years of age, many of them would not be able to enjoy the leisure because of the falling health. Therefore, it becomes a discomfort for the elderly people to enjoy the leisure. Now, especially problems of leisure is experienced with regard to some activities, especially in terms of sports activity, where the physical motor abilities are restricted, and exercises and all these factors have an influence on the physical health of the elderly. Therefore, because of the mobility limitations, they are unable to perform these leisure activities. It is very important to understand that some elders are living in a community based houses, where they have more social interactions, where they have more social support, they have support from the children, they have support from the neighbors and also from the community as a whole. Now, these are the people who can achieve more leisure even with the increasing age, where if the living conditions are permissible for them. Otherwise, it becomes very difficult for the elderly people who do not have support from the family. Sometimes when we are talking about problems of leisure, it becomes difficult for the elderly person to perform certain tasks without their personal interest. So, they prefer to stay away from these activities and they remain idle in order to make themselves comfortable with their physical condition. It is quite advisable that leisure activities should be inculcated from the beginning of the individual at the age of young adulthood, so that it becomes very easier for them to continue their leisure activities after the retirement when they become old. Therefore, it also helps in enhancing the individual's physical as well as mental health and also reduced mortality. So, it is suggested that it is best to develop hobbies and interests and also volunteer certain activities, social activities before retirement, which can be invested in more seriously after retirement. Another important problem to be addressed in leisure is that many elderly people experience tiredness, boredom and fatigue. Therefore, they are unable to sustain in a particular leisure activity. So, it becomes very difficult for them to engage themselves in leisure activities due to boredom and fatigue. Above all, some old people are quite good enough to manage their problems of leisure through successfully with the help of the social support systems like the family, like the peer group members and social support. But sometimes it also becomes very difficult for the most of the elderly people to adjust with these problems of leisure. Therefore, most of the time we can say that in general the adjustment in the old age is very difficult. Here I would like to give an example. if an employee who has worked for so many years and got retired, now he is the person who can best able to fit himself into leisure activities, engage with other people in social activities. Now he is the person who can be able to adjust with the leisure activities, and also even if he is bored or even if he feels fatigued, he can manage his levels of anxiety or the leisure problems that are concerned. But whereas an individual who is not having all these work related enjoyments or the commitment to involve into an activity, now he is the person who is unable to adjust to the situations around him. Here personality of the individual is also another important crucial factor to understand, because the sociable person or a person who has been very sociable from the beginning has a very important role to play even after the retirement, and he is the person who can engage himself into leisure activities. And if a person is not a sociable person or who is an introvert, now he finds it very difficult in engaging himself into certain leisure activities, but he can limit his activities when you compare with a sociable person. Now we are going to talk about the recreational interests that are taken place during the old age. Now recreation is an activity, as we have discussed earlier, which is performed during the leisure time, and it is mostly for the enjoyment and pleasurable purpose. Therefore, there are some recreational interest even in men and women during the old age. Here are also some common recreational activities which are performed in old age, like watching television, we were discussing, visiting friends and reading books, writing some poetry or learning some activities, music, or many other aspects are concerned with regard to recreation. And very important observation is that all these recreation activities should be personally gratifying the individual, otherwise they cannot engage into these sort of recreational activities for a longer period. Therefore, the sustainability of the recreation is also another important consideration. Sometimes with the increasing age, there is an important observation is that the level of involvement or the level of recreational activities also become reduced as the increasing age is nearing. Though the elderly people may be interested in certain activities that they are interested in, but because of the declining physical conditions they are unable to perform. As a result, it declines with the advancing age. Here are some common conditions that are responsible for changes in the recreational activities in the old people. The first of its kind is the health condition, as we were discussing. Now, as the health gradually declines, it becomes very difficult for the elderly people to perform certain recreational activities, and they have a very minimum amount of strength and energy through which they can enjoy. Therefore, the health is another important and the utmost criteria or a condition that is responsible for recreational activities. The second important condition is the economic status of the elderly person. Sometimes because of the reduced income after retirement, there is a restriction of certain financial expenses. They are no more allowed to go out or watch movies or buy clothing, and all these factors has an important role to play. Therefore, it becomes very difficult for them to enjoy all these recreation activities with regard to the economic status of the individual. This is especially true with the low socio-economic group people, whereas if you compare with the high socio-economic individual, even after retirement they are more secured, they have done lot of planning for their finances. Therefore, it does not affect their financial status, but whereas for the low socio-economic group elderly people, it becomes very difficult for them to have a recreation which involves economic factors or which involves finances. Another important common condition which is responsible for recreational activities is that education. Now, a person with a formal education has more intellectual recreational activities like serious reading, writing. So, those with limited education often depend mainly on television. Therefore, even education has a role to play in recreational activities, as I was giving an example of an individual who has been working and then retires, but he is the one who can enjoy his certain recreational activities, whereas a person who has not a formal kind of occupation as such cannot engage himself into recreational activities. Therefore, education has a role to play even in the recreational activities. Another important condition which is responsible is the gender difference. It is always there. If you compare women and men, now the leisure activities or the recreational activities, if you compare, it is women who tend to cultivate a wide range of activities, starting from domestic chores to the occupational related. So, they are in a condition to continue their domestic as well as other responsible roles that they have been doing. Though it is sedentary in nature, they continue to perform these even under recreational as well as leisure. But men, by contrast, they limit their recreational interest to sports, which they must give up when their physical health deteriorates. So, even they have a limited opportunity when you compare with women. Thus, men have a very scarcity of recreational interest in old age. The last important observation of the condition which is responsible for recreational activity is the living conditions of the elderly persons. Now, elderly persons who live in a home provided by the children, now it is important that it should be suiting their physical as well as mental abilities. Now, the physical conditions like the weather, the temperature, the room environment, all these factors have a role to play, and the conducive environment which enhances their well-being and also their interest into the leisure as well as recreational activities. Here I would like to say that elderly people who are in the low socio-economic status, now these are the highly affected people who cannot enjoy the recreational activities with the limited facilities. Especially these are the people who live with their children, who live with their grandchildren, but the activities are limited for them. The leisure activities are quite limited for them due to the socio-economic conditions. Let us conclude. Now, retirement is an important aspect or important phase in an individual's life, and retirement from professional engagement, whether it is mandatory or whether it is voluntary, now it leaves a lot of leisure time in the elderly people. Now, it becomes very crucial for the elderly people to engage themselves into leisure as well as recreational activities. Now, some people prefer to enjoy their leisure time into watching television and other resting or relaxing situations, but there are also some people who try to generate some income even after their retirement by utilizing the leisure time. So, it becomes very important for the individual to engage themselves both physically and mentally for their well-being.